So I'm going to shed a little light on what happens with men's fears and insecurities when it comes to dick size, right? One thing that I want to bring up is this, just from the jump. It's two main points, or a few main points I want to bring up. But one is this, and I've had this conversation with women, I've looked it up, but I've also had this conversation directly with women who have told me this. That when a woman's ovulating, at her peak horniness and at the peak place where she can get pregnant, that's when she desires the largest dick that she's going to desire throughout her cycle, right? So a woman can be perfectly comfortable and satisfied to a certain extent with a smaller penis throughout most of the month, or an average one, right? But in the time that she's ovulating, at the time that she's most likely to get pregnant, or the time that she can get pregnant, or at the time that she's at her peak horniness, that's when she's either going to want a larger dick than she usually is used to, or that she usually prefers, or she's going to want to get fucked a lot rougher than she usually does. This is important, the reason I'm saying this, right? And then another thing I want to bring up is this, and this is something that I say as a man who is a part of the larger penis community. You know what I mean? Not super huge, but definitely doing better than most. And what I will say is this right here. There's this process I call breaking in, right? There's this idea that I've had since I was younger, even before I was really sexually active like that. And it was just something that I think I noticed, and it was just something that it seemed to make sense to me, and I couldn't completely explain it, but as I gained more experience, I was better able to explain it, right? Which is that a woman who is sexually opened up, like a woman who becomes receptive and vaginally orgasmic, and who is like opens up to being dominated by a man sexually, usually is able to encompass a lot larger of a dick comfortably than a woman who is still somewhat sexually repressed, right? And when I talk about sexually repressed, I'm not talking about a woman who is just uncomfortable having sex. No. A woman can be sexually repressed and have all the sex in the world. You know what I mean? But it just may just be from a point of view of she just wants to get some oral sex, you know, some clitoral stimulation, and that's it, because she doesn't feel comfortable giving herself over into the pleasure of vaginal stimulation, right? You know, I remember listening to Sigmund Freud. And Sigmund Freud was talking about how a woman who is mature is a woman whose orgasms are going to migrate from her clitoris to her vagina. And I will say, I don't think it's necessarily a point of has to be an either or, but I do think that a part of a woman's process of growing into herself sexually, from what I've seen, call it mansplaining if you want to, I don't give a fuck, but part of what I've seen is that when a woman truly gets into her sexuality, when she really gets into it, that's when her vagina is going to start to become part of the focal point of her pleasure, as well as her clitoris. And when this happens, you know, there's different spots in there. There's the G spot, there's the A spot, there's the O spot, there's the fornix, all these things that are encompassed inside of the vagina, more than just the clitoris, and more than just the G spot. And people say the G spot is part of the clitoris. You can't say the A spot is part of the clitoris, and that creates orgasms. You can't say that the posterior or the anterior fornix are part of the cervix. Can't say that. I mean part of the clitoris and the overall clitoral body, because I know it's a lot bigger than just that little head that comes out. But one thing is this right here. When we're talking about this aspect of sociosexual dynamics, when it comes to size, it's like, okay, let's see, when a woman has a certain experience and she gets opened up, then usually penis size no longer is a problem for her like that, right? And as men, oftentimes when we're playing that good girl, like we want to be the good guy and we want a girl to play that good girl role to us, especially if we had her before anybody else really gets to her like that, or before she encounters a dick that's bigger than ours, then oftentimes you'll be in a situation where you're going to be hitting it, and you may be hitting the back of the vagina to where it's like, where it's hitting her cervix, and because it's hitting her cervix, it's putting her into a position where it's uncomfortable, and you'll take that as if she is being she is tapping out. You'll see this tapping out as in, okay, cool, she can't handle what I have to give, and because of that, I'll settle for the fact that she isn't tapping into to being fully orgasmic and sexually responsive. These are some things to understand, right? But the more you get into it, the more you realize that once you break women in, and this is something that I've done multiple times. Let's say I'll be having sex with a woman and I'll get her fully aroused, and when she's fully aroused to the point where the pain of her cervix being hit starts to meld with the pleasure of her A spot being hit, right? And when those two things start to blend together, then a woman will give herself over. And as you really just start grinding and hitting on that cervix, when she's fully aroused, then oftentimes, even if a woman's had dozens of bodies, or even if a woman has had a child before, or even if a woman, it's certain things that it works like that, to where a woman will bleed, and when she bleeds, it's like after that point, there is no more problems with dick size. Now, this is the issue. Once there's no more problems with dick size, that's when it's just a matter of, the bigger it is, the more stimulation she receives, right? Now, before a woman gets fully opened up sexually, then the size is good up until a certain point, but after a certain point, then, and usually for most women, that'll be around maybe 7 inches, maybe 8 inches, it depends, right? For some, it may be around 6. But up until a certain point, like when it gets there, like it's good, it looks attractive to her because it's bigger than average. But after it gets to a certain point, then it's like, it looks like it's gonna hurt, so they don't want to do it anymore. But after a woman gets fully sexually opened up and she becomes fully sexually aware, then usually, no matter how big it is, she's gonna, for the most part, be able to take it, right? Unless there's a cap to like how deep her cervix will be, or how deep it can get pushed back, or whatever it is, right? How much space is in there, because you know that thing was made to put a baby out, right? And that is something that can hurt a man's ego, like to know that type of thing, right? And let's say in these scenarios, let's say a dude's real thick, or let's say a dude's curved, or let's say a dude's humongous. In these type of scenarios, what can happen is, like, you can have straight dick, regular dick, you can have a large dick, but you know, it's one of those things where the stimulation itself from the penis itself is not going to be able to do, unless you have a very particularly shaped penis. You're not going to be able to do with somebody who's huger than you can do, for the most part, unless they're lazy. Now, if they're not lazy, that's different. I mean, if they're lazy, that's different. They may be like, it's big, but it's just big. But if they're not lazy, then anything that you can teach yourself to make yourself good at sex, somebody who's way bigger than you can do that same thing, and then wow that woman sexually. And one thing about relationships and sexual relationships is a lot of things have to do with your imagination, with your fantasies, with your preferences. And like when I talk about with the biology first approach and the blurred pill ideology, is basically the mindset of good D and guidance, which means that you give a woman some good dick. You give a woman a sexual experience that causes her imagination to be somewhat captivated with you, along with some non-sexual things, but you start with the sexual things, right? You give her a certain level of pleasure she may not be accustomed to, right? Or just some very good level of pleasure. And if she's growing as a person, then she will continue to grow as a sexual being. So if you get around to her, you know, she should continue to grow. The issue here is this. It's like when you go through that process of just chasing after all the big dicks that you can, or something like that, or chasing after every thrill, then you may get overstimulated to where a man may be able to come around and have some sex that would be good for you, and also be able to, and it's more to sex than just dick size too. But what I'm talking about is when you really get opened up, then usually not too much is going to be more pleasurable to you than getting a stiff one in you. So once that happens, a man can come to you with good knowledge, with tutelage, who also has good sexual skills, could even have a big dick, but you come across one of the monsters, it might just be over for you. You might be overstimulated to the point where that is no longer, the other man is no longer the object of your fantasies, or the object of your focus, or the object of what excites you. You know what I mean? Or what excites you, or how do I put it? What feels like challenges you, right? What feels like challenges you, what feels like excites you, because those are the things that are going to be in the back of your mind and your subconscious that will cause you to fantasize over someone, and to cause you to want to be in a situation to where you just become really curious. And then as you get opened up sexually to that individual, and they give you a whole lot of pleasure, and they open you up to suggestion in those moments of horniness, because a woman who's horny and a woman who's in the act of sex, especially if she's experiencing a pleasure she's not accustomed to, will be very, very open to suggestion. And I believe taking advantage of these moments when she's open to suggestion, to tell her things that will help her life out, or to to establish a certain level of dominance and to use that influence in a way that positively affects her, that is something that is a very powerful thing, and that's what the good deed and guidance aspect of the blurred pill ideology is about. So one thing that can happen in those situations is that, I mean, that's how that shit can go. You gotta understand that. You gotta understand that. So where a lot of men's insecurities when it comes to dick size is about is not being like, okay, well, some women like this and some women like that. Like, it's more so a thing of, like, maybe some women may have like more of a tilted cervix, and some women may have certain health issues that makes them unable to take larger penises, and some women may just, you know, be on that. But the truth is this: most women who have a certain issue with dicks and stuff like that are usually women who are somewhat sexually repressed when it comes to how responsive their vagina is to pleasure when it comes to stimuli from a penis, right? That's something that a lot of women deal with, right? And I believe a lot of that comes with society's narratives that women don't like dick, right? Society's narratives that women don't like to have sex with men, and they push those narratives in order for men to trade their resources for access to women sexually. But when a woman gets fully sexually opened up, in many of those cases, bigger is almost always going to be better, up until a certain point, and who knows what that point is. Who knows, right? Who knows? And that's what men's issues are. Sometimes a man can be afraid of a bigger dick even though his woman can't take his dick all the way, because he subconsciously knows, like innately knows, instinctually knows that if that woman were to be much more aroused by this other guy, then she'll be able to fully take the whole thing. And there's different spots that'll get hit. Like if you're cute, really big and curved and real thick and stuff like that, then it's going to be a lot easier for you to create G-spot orgasms, right? And those G-spot orgasms can be like a full body orgasm, or like a rush or a wave of relaxation over a woman that can affect her emotionally, right? Let's say you have a longer dick that maybe it's angled down or something like that, and you hitting it from the back, you know. Then with that kind of dick right there, you might hit a woman all up in her A-spot, and hitting a woman in her A-spot like repetitively can put her into the place where she starts crying tears of joy, or crying tears of feeling emotionally overwhelmed during sex. Like, sex can affect women emotionally in different ways if they're opened up to it. These are some things that a lot of people don't understand, but I think men instinctually understand this, and this is why men have certain sexual insecurities and jealousies when it comes to different things, because a lot of stuff is about influence. And you know, one thing I've learned growing up, and one thing I've learned just through my experiences with women, is that there's nothing you could tell a woman to get her to stop dealing with some dick that's good to her. I mean, I figured out some stuff to say, but at the same time, it's like, it's not going to work. You can't, like, no matter how bad a dude is for a woman, you can't convince her to stop fucking with some dick that's good for her. And in some ways, that's a bad thing. Like, dickmatizing is real. In some ways, that's a bad thing, right? But in some ways, that's a good thing. If you're a good man to a woman, you're treating her well, and you just so happen to have some good dick that puts her under your influence to where she listens to you and she follows you and she's submissive with you, and she follows your lead on things, she trusts you, and then you confirm that trust through your actions, but you create that level of influence through the dick that you've given her and your masculinity. Like, when that happens, this is a great scenario. But what men are often afraid of is that, you know, there's always the possibility that if it is somewhat because of the dick, another dude come around, she gets opened up, you can even be the one who opens her up. Another one comes around, then she may just get caught in that loop, get caught in that cycle, get diverted from the trajectory and the direction that's going in. Then a woman can often be caught and set down that path of just chasing the thrill of the next big one, the next big one, the next one, you know, and just chasing those thrills. And it kind of creates this cycle to where a woman may almost never get out of it. And once a woman goes down that cycle, it just takes her right back to the Madonna whore complex of what was going on before she started getting into sexuality more, before she started becoming sexually aware. Before a woman starts becoming sexually aware, then she may have that Madonna whore complex of, well, I don't want to deal with that kind of guy because he seems like a hoe. And this guy right here, he seems nice. He's nice to me. I want to deal with him because he's nice. And that's because she doesn't factor sex in, right? She just thinks, well, the dude's pursuing her. He's nice, so he's kind of cute, so she'll go for it instead of thinking about sexual attraction. If a woman goes through that process to where she starts opening up to her sexuality and she makes that more of a factor, then once those things happen, it'll be a situation to where she will enjoy that sex and she'll start to be influenced by it, right? But another thing that can happen is after a woman gets to that point where she finds some sex that she's satisfied with, she's satisfied, she's taking to new places, and then she's also learning things and she's receiving guidance and all this other stuff. Then after that happens, if she then continues to chase after the thrills and she just keeps getting more and more and more sexual, and there's nothing wrong with getting more sexual. You should grow with sexuality as you get older. But as you chase after thrills and novelty, and just the novelty of like dick size and all that other stuff like that, or just like dudes just super built, different things like that, that it could send a woman on a trajectory to where she will have sexual experiences that she wouldn't be able to get a man of that same level of conspicuous masculinity to want to date her long term. And once a woman has that experience, then it'll bring her right back to the place of a Madonna whore complex, or what I call a gentleman gigolo complex, to where she will be able to have sex with those guys, but once she comes to a place where she's tired of feeling like she's being used, she's going to tell herself, okay, cool, I'm tired of being used. I don't want to just have sex. I'm tired of just sex. So let me be with this guy who treats me well. And sometimes that can work out if the woman grows enough sexually within herself and does her Kegels to the point where almost regardless of the size, she can meld to it, and she becomes sexually integrated to where the emotional connection increases her sexual pleasure. Like when that type of thing happens, then that can be overcome. But if she doesn't get to that place, then she'll be set on a loop and on a cycle to where after she goes through that process of dealing with more and more conspicuously masculine men when it comes to, casual sex, that she'll get to the point where when she's ready for a relationship, she's going to go back to dealing with whatever kind of nice guy she was dealing with before that she wasn't all that sexually attracted to. So these are, men's insecurities, and these are the reasons behind men's insecurities when it comes to social-sexual dynamics, when it comes to like dick size and things like that. And just different aspects of the biology first approach and the blur pill ideology, and how these different things can occur. So a lot of people don't want to talk about it. I think being a man with a larger dick kind of puts me in a position to where I can talk about this without somebody just trying to assume it means I'm insecure or something like that. Like, even if you're larger, you can still have some size insecurities. Like, if you ever been on Big Dick Problems on Reddit, you'll see that a lot of guys who are larger will still feel that way, because there's always going to be larger. That's just how things work. But you have to understand that some of these insecurities that people have are irrational, but a lot of times they aren't irrational. They come from a semi-real place of things that are somewhat understood. And I think a lot of people need to be more honest about this particular topic.